During my father-in-law's 60th birthday celebration, my mother-in-law publicly scolded me in front of our family. She said I was unattractive and bad at preparing things. I felt embarrassed and wondered where my husband, who usually supports me, was, but he was nowhere to be seen. As soon as I arrived at my in-laws' house, feeling fine, my mother-in-law suddenly complained about her back pain and acted as if she couldn't move. She handed all the party preparations over to me, and later, she continued to criticize me in front of everyone there for the celebration. Her harsh words dampened the festive mood, turning it awkward and tense. My father-in-law finally spoke up, breaking the silence with a simple but surprising question: "Is that all you have to say?" No one could have guessed what would happen next. I'm Sarah, 35 years old, and I married my husband Michael 6 years ago. He's 3 years younger than me, and we have a 5-year-old daughter. My mother-in-law has disliked me since the beginning because I'm older than her son. Every time I visit for holidays or special occasions, she makes sarcastic remarks, especially when my husband isn't around. She said things like, "I wish I had a younger, prettier daughter-in-law, not someone with age spots like you." Hearing these things hurts, especially because she criticizes my appearance, but I try not to react, hoping to keep the peace since we only see each other a few times a year. However, my silence seems to irritate her more, and she escalates, calling me thick-skinned and unmodest for not reacting to her insults. In front of my husband, she acts completely differently, being kind and polite to me. My husband has no idea how badly she treats me, and I avoid sharing my frustrations because I'm afraid he might not understand and I'll end up blamed. Going to her house has become very difficult for me, but my father-in-law is kind and gentle. He doesn't talk much, but he senses when her words get to me. On those occasions, he quietly reassures me, saying, "Sarah, if things are hard for you, don't hesitate to let me know. I want to be here for you." I often wondered if my father-in-law noticed the way my mother-in-law harassed me. Maybe he held back from openly supporting me to avoid making things harder for me. To celebrate my kind father-in-law's 60th birthday, our family got up early and drove 3 hours to their house. I was feeling a bit under the weather with a mild fever and lingering fatigue, so my husband Michael did all the driving. When we arrived, my mother-in-law came out with a cheerful smile. "Well, look who's here. It's been a while, Michael," she said. Then she looked at him and added, "You look tired." Michael admitted he was tired from the drive, and she offered to get a bed ready so he could rest. Michael suggested I should rest too since I had been taking care of our daughter on the drive and wasn't feeling well, but my mother-in-law quickly interrupted, saying, "Oh, Michael, I called Sarah yesterday, and we planned to go shopping together for the birthday celebration." I was surprised since she hadn't called or made any such plan with me. Exhausted from watching over our active 5-year-old and feeling unwell, I wanted to rest, too. Michael noticed this and suggested that maybe his mother could do the shopping without me, but she insisted, "It's your father's big day, and I want Sarah to help pick the best ingredients. Sarah, you'll keep your promise, right?" Without giving me a chance to explain, she grabbed my arm and steered me back to the car. Once we were out of Michael's earshot, she glared at me and muttered, "I don't think you need time to rest." Then, with a forced smile, she loudly thanked me for driving, keeping up the act for Michael. Reluctantly, I agreed. I turned to hand our daughter over to Michael, but my mother-in-law quickly took her, put her in the car seat, and shut the door, saying, "Taking care of the child is a mother's job." With no other choice, I got into the driver's seat, telling Michael I'd handle the shopping. As soon as we started driving, her tone changed completely. "You can't even take care of your own child properly. Stop making Michael do everything for you. You're just an incompetent, aging daughter-in-law." Michael waved goodbye, unaware of her words. The drive to the supermarket was tense. My mother-in-law continued to criticize me, saying, "I'll make you regret being lazy and letting my son do all the work." I tried to explain that I wasn't feeling well, but she cut me off, blaming my poor health on bad self-care. She even commented on my appearance, saying I had crow's feet, dark spots on my cheeks, and sagging skin. By the time we arrived, I felt completely drained, nodding along just to get through the ordeal. I sometimes wondered if my father-in-law noticed how my mother-in-law treated me. Maybe he didn't openly support me to avoid making things harder. To celebrate his 60th birthday, we left early and drove 3 hours to their house. I wasn't feeling great. I had a mild fever and felt tired, so my husband Michael handled the driving. When we arrived, my mother-in-law came out smiling. Well, look who's here. It's been a while, Michael," she said cheerfully. Then, noticing how tired he looked, She offered to prepare a bed for him to rest. Michael accepted, and he suggested I rest too since I'd been taking care of our daughter on the drive and wasn't feeling well. But my mother-in-law interrupted, saying, "Oh, Michael, I called Sarah yesterday, and we planned to go shopping together for the birthday celebration. You go rest, Michael, and Sarah will join me as soon as she brings in the luggage." I was surprised, as she hadn't called or made any plans with me. I was exhausted from watching our energetic 5-year-old, and I really wanted to rest too. Michael could see this and suggested, "Since Sarah's not feeling well, maybe you could handle the shopping alone." But my mother-in-law was firm. "It's a special day, and I want Sarah's help to choose the best ingredients. Sarah, you'll keep your promise, right?" She didn't give me a chance to refuse. After I set down the luggage, she took my arm, pulling me back toward the car. Once we were away from Michael, she glared at me and said, "I don't think you need to rest." But when we got into the car, she loudly thanked me for driving, keeping up a friendly appearance for Michael. Reluctantly, I got into the driver's seat. I tried to hand our daughter to Michael, but my mother-in-law quickly placed her in the car seat, shutting the door. "Looking after the child is a mother's job," she said. Then, as soon as we started driving, her tone changed completely, and she began criticizing me. "You can't even look after your child properly. Stop making Michael do everything. You're just an incompetent, aging daughter-in-law." Michael waved goodbye. Not hearing any of this, I drove us to the supermarket. Tense from her constant criticisms, she continued to berate me, saying, "I'll make you regret being lazy and making my son drive." I tried to explain I wasn't feeling well, but she cut me off, blaming my health issues on poor self-care. She even made rude comments about my appearance, saying I had crow's feet, dark spots, and sagging skin. By the time we arrived, I was completely drained and just nodded along to get through it. "Please, can I rest a bit?" I asked my mother-in-law, hoping for a small break, but she snapped, "You have no right to defy me. This is what you get for making Michael drive alone." I murmured to myself, "Is this really what you want? If you have time to complain, you have time to work," she replied, urging me on. "Hurry up, we're short on time." After eating, clean the bathroom and toilet. Even though it felt unfair, I didn't want to make a scene. I spent the day weeding the garden and scrubbing the bathroom, thinking that after this birthday party, I wouldn't have to see her for a while. Just as I finished, Michael, who had been resting, came over. He looked at me with surprise and concern. "Sarah, are you okay? Don't push yourself too hard if you're not feeling well." "Thank you," I said gratefully. "I'll take a short break." But just as I was about to lie down, my mother-in-law let out a dramatic cry, clutching her back. She had been moving around just fine a moment ago, but now she complained of sudden back pain. With a weak voice, she said, "This is terrible. My back hurts so much. I can't do anything. I won't be able to cook for everyone." Then she looked at me. "Sarah, you're my only hope. What should I do?" Though I was tired and feeling a bit sick, I forced myself to help. I asked Michael to look after our daughter and went into the kitchen. "Are you sure you're okay?" he asked. "I'm fine. I cook all the time," I replied, trying to put on a brave face, even though my head was spinning, and the smell of food was making me nauseous. I kept going because it was an important day for my father-in-law. When I finished cooking, my father-in-law came into the kitchen and smiled at me. "Thank you for preparing all this, Sarah." "Not at all. It's for you," I said, hoping he'd enjoy the meal. Soon, relatives started arriving, and the atmosphere was lively as they gathered to celebrate. But just as we were about to start eating, my mother-in-law interrupted. "I'm sorry, everyone," she announced. My back pain flared up, so my daughter-in-law had to cook all the food. I apologize for the unappetizing meal prepared by my unattractive, clumsy daughter-in-law. The room fell silent as my father-in-law and Michael froze in shock. She continued, "She's not only unattractive, but also completely inept. I worry that Michael is stuck with a woman like this." The festive mood turned somber. Like a funeral, my supportive husband, who was supposed to be watching our daughter, was nowhere to be seen. Then, unexpectedly, my father-in-law, who had been sitting quietly, stood up. "Is that all you have to say?" Before my mother-in-law could respond, Michael walked in holding our daughter and a suitcase. His face was unusually serious. "Dad," he said, "I've packed her things, just like you asked." My mother-in-law's face lit up, thinking I was the one being kicked out, but Michael handed the suitcase to her instead. Shocked, she stammered, "What?" My father-in-law's voice cut through the silence. "Take your things and leave this house immediately." Stunned, My mother-in-law realized what was happening. She tried to argue. Why should I be the one kicked out? Sarah is the useless one. She doesn't even keep the bathroom clean. But her words had no effect. The family had finally had enough of her treatment of me. The toilet is left dirty, and you call Sarah useless? She's done more for this household than you ever do. And I'm tired of watching you treat her so poorly, my father-in-law said, his patience finally worn thin. It's a mother-in-law's duty to discipline her daughter-in-law, she argued, trying to keep her composure. I was just pointing out her faults. It's my way of preparing her for taking care of us one day. Preparing her? You mean tormenting her? My husband interrupted, holding up a receipt he'd found. She even paid for today's groceries. Don't tell me you just forgot to mention that. Well, I was going to pay her back, she stammered, trying to explain. My father-in-law looked at her with raised eyebrows. Enough, you've been bullying Sarah, and it ends today. Desperately, my mother-in-law tried her usual tricks, crying and pleading with my husband, but this time, he wasn't swayed. Mia already told us about what happened in the supermarket. And in the car too. You made Sarah weed the garden and clean the bathroom. You can't hide the truth from us anymore. You can't believe what a child says, she protested. Mia doesn't lie, my husband replied, walking to the car and activating the dash cam. The footage, complete with audio and clear expressions, started to play, revealing her harsh words in the car. Relatives who had gathered nearby watched, shocked by what they saw and heard. That's horrible. I can't believe she'd treat her that way, murmured one of the relatives. Mother-in-law's face turned pale. Panicking, she suddenly dashed toward the car, surprisingly swift for someone with back pain, and tried to turn off the dash cam. But before she could, my father-in-law held her arm firmly. She was caught. With her misdeeds laid bare, my mother-in-law sank to the ground, speechless. My father-in-law then handed her a paper. I've filled in my part. You just need to sign here. A divorce form? She gasped. Yes. I never thought it would come to this, but I'm done. Don't ever step foot in this house again. She tried pleading, this time to me. Sarah, please forgive me, she whimpered, tears streaming down her face. But I wasn't swayed. You exposed your own behavior. I can't forgive you, I said firmly. It's time for you to go. As she grabbed her suitcase, the commotion had attracted the attention of the neighbors, who watched from afar. Mother-in-law, seeing her theatrics were useless, quickly took her suitcase and left, her supposed back pain miraculously gone. After she had left, I turned to my father-in-law. I'm sorry for all this on your 60th birthday. Sarah, you've done nothing wrong. I'm sorry for the trouble you've had to endure, he replied kindly, with warmth in his eyes. Relatives stayed and enjoyed the meal I'd prepared, praising the food and creating a warm and lively celebration. All my exhaustion faded away, and we finally celebrated my father-in-law's milestone in a truly joyous atmosphere. Eventually, my mother-in-law agreed to the divorce, and it was discovered she had also been misusing my father-in-law's funds, spending recklessly. She was ordered to repay the $10,000 she had spent. Facing financial challenges, she was left to manage on her own. And with that, peace returned to our family, a sense of relief and new beginnings settling in as we moved forward without her disruptive presence. Since the divorce, my mother-in-law's life has drastically changed. Now, she works as a janitor in an office building late at night, struggling financially, and living in a rundown apartment that's seen better days. Meanwhile, my life has taken a joyful turn. A few weeks after the family gathering, I found out I was pregnant with our second child. It turns out the discomfort I'd been feeling that day was from the early stages of pregnancy. Now, 5 months along, my husband Michael has been incredibly caring and attentive. An ultrasound confirmed we're expecting a baby boy, and both Michael and my father-in-law are thrilled, eagerly awaiting his arrival. My father-in-law even sent over a set of blue baby clothes as a gift, a touching gesture that made me feel truly cherished. Our daughter, who's also overjoyed at the thought of having a younger brother, practices taking care of her dolls every day, pretending they're her baby brother. Watching her gentle play fills me with happiness and hope for the peaceful future we're building as a family. Our lives are finally filled with warmth, support, and joy, just as a family should be.
One night during our honeymoon, I suddenly woke up to overhear my husband engaged in a secretive and disturbing phone conversation. Trembling with anxiety, I carefully peered at his phone and discovered something shocking. Realizing the gravity of the situation, I took his passport, packed my things, and flew back to New York alone, planning my next move against him. Upon my return, I was approached by a mysterious individual. "My name is Kate," she introduced herself. "I work at an office in New York. I met your husband through a mutual friend. After a few dinners and realizing our chemistry, we married following a year of dating. Yuan is handsome and kind-hearted, but there was something that had been troubling me. My concern began as our wedding approached. Normally, Yuan came home later than I did, but one day when my overtime extended and I returned late, something felt off. I noticed a pair of women's shoes next to Yuan's work shoes, shoes that didn't belong to me. Suspicion grew as I overheard a conversation between a man and a woman. Though I couldn't catch all of it, Yuan's unmistakable voice and the woman's cheerful tone fueled my worries. I quickly activated the video function on my smartphone and entered the living room, only to find Yuan and my mother-in-law there. "Oh, you're back. Welcome home, Kate," Yuan said, his tone apologetic. I was relieved to see my suspicions about infidelity were unfounded, but then another surprise awaited me. The room was filled with stacked cardboard boxes. Confused, I asked, "What's with all these boxes? What's going on?" "We're packing for a move," Yuan explained. "Mom is helping." "Moving where?" I asked, my head spinning. "You didn't mention anything about moving." "Oh, I assumed that after getting married, moving into our house was the next step," Yuan's mother said nonchalantly. "I wasn't informed of any plans to live with your parents," I protested. "This sudden change disrupts my vision of our married life. I can't agree to such unilateral decisions." My mother-in-law's response was casual. "Isn't it normal to live together after marriage? If that's an issue, you might as well consider divorce." Her words cut deeply. "It's easier for both of us to live here, especially if you ever need anything. It's a win-win," Yuan added. Feeling cornered between Yuan and his mother, I reluctantly agreed to move into their home. The transition proved incredibly stressful. Yuan's attachment to his mother became even more apparent. He constantly referenced her opinions, and most of the household chores were still managed by her. Whenever I cooked, he'd comment that Mom's cooking tastes better. It seemed my mother-in-law took pleasure in this dynamic, and my father-in-law remained silently observant, never engaging with me. I often felt undervalued in the house. What bothered me most was my mother-in-law's extravagant spending habits. The situation was more challenging than I had anticipated, and the strains on our marriage began to show. I soon realized that my mother-in-law had a penchant for luxury brand items, buying them eagerly whenever a new release caught her eye. Each time a new product was announced, she would ask me, "I want this, but I'm short on money. Can you lend me some?" Although I thought to myself that if she didn't have the money, she shouldn't buy it, I couldn't object since she handled all the housework. As a result, the savings I had accumulated since my student days were dwindling. When I brought this up to my husband, he simply said, "We're allowed to live here, so don't complain." While I didn't actively choose to live in this house, there was a reason I stayed. Deep down, I knew my husband genuinely respected me. On our days off, he always made an effort to spend quality time with me and had even planned our honeymoon in advance. Despite the difficulties of living with his family, his love kept me going. Finally, our much-anticipated honeymoon arrived. We were heading to Italy, a destination I had always dreamed of visiting for its authentic cuisine. My husband had made this dream a reality, and the excitement of traveling abroad with the person I loved most made my heart race. However, our eagerly awaited adventure took a drastic turn one night. Late into the evening, I woke up to use the bathroom and noticed that my husband was not beside me. Assuming he might be up for the same reason, I left the bedroom and overheard him on the phone. Who could he be calling at this hour? As I listened closely, a chilling statement reached my ears. "By this time tomorrow, Kate will be long gone to the afterlife. Don't worry, Mom. I won't mess up. I'll call you later." The voice on the phone seemed to be his mother's, and the implication of what he said about me being in the afterlife sent a shiver down my spine. Fearful that he might notice me, I hurriedly pretended to be asleep. When my husband returned to bed and soon fell into a deep sleep, I quietly took his smartphone and went to the bathroom. His phone wasn't locked, making it easy for me to access. Although I knew snooping was wrong in this potentially life-threatening situation, I felt it was necessary. I couldn't resist the urge to investigate further. I opened his messaging app and read through his conversation with his mother. The messages revealed a chilling plan. He intended to kill me for the insurance money, which his mother would then use to splurge on luxury brands. The blood drained from my face as the horrifying reality sunk in. My husband had always been somewhat of a mama's boy, but I had never imagined he would scheme with his mother like this. In a panic, I took a screenshot of their messages and lay back on the bed, even with my eyes closed. The overwhelming fear made it impossible to sleep. The night dragged on, and when morning arrived, bringing the usual buzz of trains and people starting their day, I knew I had to get out of there. I quickly gathered my belongings, deciding to leave the hotel and head home. As I packed my suitcase, I noticed my husband's passport on the table. A sudden idea struck me. I would leave him stranded abroad. I grabbed the passport and rushed out, heading straight to the airport. Ignoring his numerous calls, I boarded a flight back to New York. Once home, I began preparing for my retaliation. I knew I couldn't return to the house where I lived with his parents, so I found a reasonably priced hotel in New York. I started collecting additional evidence and contacting lawyers. Whenever his parents were out, his mother at her craft class and his father golfing, I would sneak into their house to retrieve my belongings. My husband's relentless attempts to contact me went unanswered as I ignored them completely. One day, while packing my things at his parents' house, I thought I had a couple of hours before they would return. Suddenly, I heard a voice behind me. "Kate, is that you?" I jumped, startled to find my father-in-law standing there. He wasn't supposed to be back so early. Our honeymoon was supposed to last until today. My presence there was unexpected, and I struggled to come up with an explanation. Should I tell him the truth about why I returned to New York? But what if he was involved in the plan with my husband? As I was on the verge of panicking, my father-in-law suggested, "How about we go somewhere else to talk, like a nearby cafe?" To my surprise, he made this offer, likely because his wife would be returning soon. I agreed, and we headed to the cafe. "Why are you here in the middle of your honeymoon? Is Ewan back?" he asked once we were seated. I hesitated, unsure whether he was involved in their scheme. If he was, revealing my plan for revenge would be futile. "Didn't your wife mention anything to you?" I asked cautiously. After a moment of thought, he replied, "She hasn't said a word to me." His expression suggested genuine confusion. Relieved, I decided to explain everything. "Do you know about this plan?" I handed him the printed messages between my husband and his mother. His eyes widened as he read them. "I've seen them talking together a few times, but I had no idea they were plotting something like this," he admitted. It was clear he was genuinely unaware of their scheme. I told him how I had overheard my husband's conversation with his mother in Italy, which led me to discover their plan. The shock drove me to return to New York alone. "I see. I'm deeply sorry that my wife was involved in something like this," he said. "There's no need to apologize, father-in-law. It's not your fault," I reassured him. "As for the future, I'm truly sorry, but I'm considering ending my marriage with Yuan." "That's your decision, Kate. I want you to make the choice that's right for you." "I'm at a loss for words about all this," he said. Afterwards, my father-in-law continued to apologize. Up until now, I had only sensed a distant atmosphere from him and worried that he might not think well of me. But seeing his genuine concern and sincerity, I began to believe this was his true nature. I couldn't reconcile how someone as kind-hearted as my father-in-law could have such a problematic wife and son. As I pondered this, he shared an incident with me. "Kate, did my wife ask you for money to buy luxury brand items?" he asked. "Yes, she did," I admitted. "It might be partly my fault." "How so?" he asked. "When we were newlyweds, I gave her an expensive designer bag for her birthday. Since then, she seemed obsessed with branded goods. I wish she'd choose items more appropriate for her age," he explained. "I didn't realize she even borrowed money to buy them. I got really angry with her for that, and I thought she had understood. I never imagined she would try to get money from you. I must have underestimated her." He bowed his head in apology. I had never understood my mother-in-law's obsession with branded items. But even if that was a factor, I couldn't forgive her actions. "It's not your fault, father-in-law," I said. "She continued her behavior even after you warned her. It's her own issue." "That's comforting to hear," he replied. "By the way, where's Ewan? Didn't he come back with you?" I hesitated. How would he react if he knew his son was stranded abroad? I had to be honest now. The truth is, I took Ewan's passport with me, so he might not be able to return for a while, I confessed. I know it was a drastic move, but it was the only way to ensure no one interfered with my preparations. My father-in-law looked shocked at first, but then he chuckled. I see. Given the situation, it might have been unavoidable. That's why he said that. Wait, what did he say? I asked. Well, I overheard my wife talking to Ewan on the phone on the day you returned to New York. Ewan seemed a bit flustered by your absence but mentioned that it might actually make our plan work. At that moment, I didn't understand, but now it makes sense, he said. If that's the case, I'll support you too. That would be very helpful, I said. As we chatted, catching up on everything that had happened so far, my smartphone rang unexpectedly. It was Ewan. He must have realized his passport was missing while preparing to return home and decided to call. I answered the call. Hello. Kate, finally, you picked up. Where are you? I've been worried sick because I couldn't reach you. I'm glad to hear you're okay, Ewan said, his voice filled with concern. I'm relieved you're okay too, I replied. I'm sorry. The truth is, I received an urgent message from my parents and had to return to New York immediately, I explained. I was so rushed that I didn't have time to contact you. I see, Ewan said, but do you know where my passport is? Actually, because I had to leave in such a hurry, I accidentally took your passport with me, I admitted. What am I supposed to do now? Ewan asked, sounding frustrated. If it's alright with you, I think it would be faster for you to get your passport reissued there rather than waiting for me to send it, I suggested. Reissue it, Ewan said, exasperated. You know I can't take any more time off from work. I'll contact your workplace and explain the situation, I assured him. I'll also inform my in-laws. I'll handle it from here. Okay, I trust you. I'm truly sorry for the trouble. Please take care and come back safely, Ewan said. I ended the call and took a deep breath. My quick thinking had helped manage the situation. Thanks to my father-in-law's assistance, the process of moving our belongings and handling the divorce proceedings went smoothly. The day finally came for my husband to return. His passport had been reissued without issue, and he came home with my mother-in-law who had picked him up from the airport. I'm back, Ewan announced. I didn't expect such a mess at the end. Really, it's Kate's fault. She needs to be more careful. My mother-in-law, having heard the story from Ewan, grumbled in annoyance. Perhaps she was displeased because my early return had disrupted some of her plans. While I had my own grievances to address, I kept my focus on the upcoming situation, considering these matters trivial in comparison. When Ewan and my mother-in-law arrived, my father-in-law, with a stern look on his face, said, Sorry to bother you right after you got home, but come here. He then led them to the living room. Please have a seat, I said, motioning to my husband and mother-in-law. They looked slightly startled, but complied and sat down quietly. I fixed my gaze on them and began, You must be tired from the trip, but there's something important we need to discuss. Important? My husband asked, his confusion evident. What are you talking about? I'll get straight to the point, I said, my voice steady. Ewan, I want a divorce. What? A divorce? Ewan blinked rapidly, clearly taken aback. Kate, what are you talking about? You left our son in Italy, and now you want a divorce just as you're back? This is incomprehensible and thoughtless. Thoughtless? I retorted. Isn't that what you two are being? What did you say? My mother-in-law exclaimed, her eyes widening in shock. Do you really have no awareness? What is this supposed to mean? Can you please explain? I handed her a printout of a messaging app screen. This is a conversation between you and my husband, discussing your outrageous plans. What's this? Anyone could fake something like this, she scoffed. Plans and evidence don't mean anything if they're made up. If this alone isn't enough, I said, placing a voice recorder on the table. How about this? I pressed play, and the recorded conversation began. The recording clearly captured my husband and mother-in-law discussing how their plans were thwarted by my unexpected return to New York and their subsequent disappointment. I managed to record this thanks to my father-in-law, I explained. My mother-in-law is hard of hearing and always uses speaker mode, making her calls loud and clear. My father-in-law took the initiative to record their conversation. This should be hard to argue against, don't you think? Wait a minute, Ewan said, his voice tense. Kate, it's not like that. Please just wait. I just acted out of necessity for my mother, Ewan said, his voice earnest. I never really wanted any of this. but she said she needed money for luxury items, and I couldn't bear to see her sad. Now I realize I don't want a divorce. Let's leave this house and start a new life together, just the two of us. How about that? I sighed deeply, struggling to keep my frustration in check. What kind of thought process leads to such optimism? I asked. You should really stop calling her mom all the time. It doesn't sit well with me. I appreciate your care for your mother, but plotting to get rid of your wife for insurance money to buy her gifts is beyond comprehension. Living with someone like that? No way. Just the thought gives me a headache. Yuan seemed unprepared for my response and was at a loss for words. I'm going to divorce you no matter what, I continued firmly. I'll be demanding the division of property from both of you and also asking for reimbursement for the luxury items I bought for your mother in the past. But if you do that, I won't be able to buy any more bags or watches, my mother-in-law interjected, still fixated on her luxury goods. Her obsession left me speechless. Enough was enough. Suddenly, my father-in-law shouted, all you think about is yourself. Have you ever considered how much pain Kate has been through? Are the luxury items you crave so desperately worth someone else's suffering? Do you even understand the emotional burden you've placed on her? His words struck a chord and silenced them. While his outburst lightened my mood slightly, I wasn't finished yet. Yuan, when did you find out? I asked. On the first night of our honeymoon, he replied, looking down. I overheard you talking to your mother in the middle of the night. That's when I found out, so I returned to New York the next morning. My husband seemed to realize something at that moment. You didn't tell the company about this, did you? Who knows, I replied, but I think we'll find out soon enough. As if on cue, Yuan's cell phone rang. You've got to be kidding me, I said. The call was from his company. Hesitating, Yuan answered, hello. Yes. What? Fired? Wait a minute, but before he could explain, the call ended. I've already submitted evidence regarding this matter to your company, I said. With the loss of both his job and his marriage, Yuan crumbled to the floor, unable to come to terms with reality. From now on, any communication will go through my lawyer. Don't ever show up in front of me again. Thus, our brief marriage ended abruptly. However, the story didn't end there. My lawyer advised me to report their actions to the police as their plan constituted illegal activity. I followed the advice, and while they weren't arrested, they did face fines. My husband struggled to find new employment, and my mother-in-law faced criticism from the community. To cover the damages and other costs, she had to sell most of her luxury possessions. The only item she kept was a bag given to her by my father-in-law on her birthday. Now, my father-in-law controls the family finances, and my mother-in-law's spending is severely restricted. They've certainly learned a valuable lesson. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying my single life in a city apartment. Though my marriage ended soon after it began, I don't feel lonely or sad. On the contrary, I feel refreshed and liberated from that household. If I ever decide to marry again, I'm done with living with in-laws. Living alone has its challenges, but the freedom to live without catering to others is truly liberating. Now that I'm free from my mother-in-law's financial demands, both mentally and financially, I've started saving again. My hope is to share happy times with someone special in the future. That's my wish. The sound of footsteps on the street below felt like daggers piercing my soul. I had always had my grievances with my husband, but never to this extent. The way he could so easily destroy everything important to me. There was no coming back from that. Forgiving him was out of the question. I would make him regret ignoring me, my family, and his selfishness. My name is Jennifer, a 45-year-old housewife. I live in a small flat with my husband. Growing up, I was particularly close to my grandfather, a man I admired deeply. Even though my grandmother had passed, my grandfather remained strong and healthy for his age. We would meet occasionally, and his wisdom was something I cherished. A family must support each other no matter what. It's that support that makes us a family, he'd often say. Those words still echo in my heart. Family is about mutual care, not one-sided sacrifice. I wanted to live by his example, to build a life like his, but life had other plans. Before we got married, my husband seemed like a different man. He helped with chores and acted kind. But as soon as we started living together, he changed completely. I was left to do everything, cleaning, cooking, everything. Don't leave all the housework to me, I would plead with him time and again. His response was always the same. I'm tired from work. It's your job to handle the home. His dismissiveness turned our conversations into arguments. "Why are you so selfish?" I would ask, desperate for him to understand. But his answer was always the same. "That's your role. You're useless as a wife if you can't even do that." The more he belittled me, the more I started to wonder if I was indeed the problem. But I couldn't shake my mother's words from my mind. Even as a stay-at-home wife, you're not supposed to do everything alone. A family works together. I tried to follow her advice, but nothing I said to my husband made any difference. Then the worst news arrived. My grandfather had collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. My mother called to tell me, and I knew I had to be with him. "Can you handle things at home while I go visit Grandpa?" I asked my husband. His response was as cold as ever. "Why should you visit? You're the wife. Your place is at home." His words stung. "Grandpa's seriously ill. I need to go," I insisted, but he shrugged it off. "Who's going to take care of the house if you leave?" I begged him to let me go, but he refused. I felt trapped, helpless. My mother tried to reassure me by taking care of everything, but my heart ached as Grandpa's condition worsened. I thought about visiting in secret, but I didn't have the means to get there. My husband had the car for work. Night after night, I lay awake, fearing I would never see my grandfather again. A month later, he passed away. I never got to say goodbye. At the funeral, seeing his face so frail and thin, I wept harder than anyone else. The sorrow of losing him consumed me, but it was soon followed by another blow, my growing indifference to my husband. Every day, I felt like a shell of myself, empty and disconnected. One day, out of the blue, my husband approached me. "There's a place I want to take you. I need you to come with me," he said. For a brief moment, I hoped he was trying to make amends, that maybe he was finally willing to be the kind of partner my grandfather always spoke of. I followed him, clinging to that flicker of hope. We arrived in a quiet residential area. Nothing special about the place, no signs of change or reconciliation. We stopped in front of the house, and he pointed at it. "What's this?" I asked, confused. "This," he said, "is our new home." I stared at him in shock. "A new home? Where did you get the money for this?" He looked at me, completely unfazed. "From your grandfather's inheritance. I know about it, even though you tried to hide it. With that much money, of course we can buy a house." I was speechless. I wasn't even allowed to visit my grandfather when he was dying, but my husband was ready to claim his inheritance. The betrayal felt like a knife in my heart. I couldn't comprehend how immoral and heartless his thinking was. He seemed to lack any trace of humanity. When I refused to give him the inheritance, he snapped back, "Your money is my money. Stop saying ridiculous things. Just hand over the money for the house." His selfishness brought tears to my eyes, and I noticed people passing by giving him cold stares as he laughed loudly, oblivious to their judgment. If I had known his true nature, I would have never married him. Why hadn't I seen it sooner? I felt a surge of anger. How could he trample on my feelings so easily? By this point, my love for him had completely vanished. "You seem to misunderstand," I said, trying to stay calm. "But I can't inherit my grandfather's estate." My words caught him off guard, and for a moment his face reflected surprise. But he quickly recovered, smirking as if mocking me. "Don't lie just because you don't want to give me the money. I know your grandfather left it all to you." "Yes, he did," I admitted. "It was written in his will, but I renounced the inheritance. Even if I had accepted it, I wouldn't use his estate for you. I couldn't bear to see my grandfather's legacy wasted on someone like you." His face reddened with fury. "What? You can't just give it up. Go and get it back right now. We won't be able to make the loan payments." "I'm sorry, but I can't do that. I won't hand over my grandfather's estate to someone who only cares about money." My words hit hard, and he lost his composure, shouting, Don't get smart with me." But his anger no longer had any power over me. His threats felt hollow, the desperate rantings of a man who had lost control. I thought back to my grandfather, and it only deepened my resolve. This man, who refused to let me visit my dying grandfather, had no right to the inheritance. Families are meant to support each other, but he showed no such care. He wasn't family anymore, and his fate was no longer my concern. What mattered most was honoring my grandfather's memory, and with that, I felt a sense of peace. "What about the loan?" My husband, realizing I wouldn't back down, looked panicked. "I don't know," I replied coldly. "Solve it yourself." Flustered, he fumbled for his phone. "Hello, Mom," he said, his voice shaky. I soon saw my mother-in-law rushing toward us, her face full of confusion. "What's going on?" she asked, looking between the two of us. I calmly explained, "Your son bought a house without telling me and planned to use my grandfather's inheritance to pay for it. And despite my grandfather being on his deathbed, he refused to let me visit him." My mother-in-law's face turned red with anger as she processed what I said. She glanced at her son, who gave her a sheepish nod in confirmation. "Why would you do that?" she shouted, her voice full of fury. "You didn't even let her see her grandfather, and now you want the inheritance. That's irresponsible." Before anyone could react, she slapped him hard across the face. My husband, clearly shocked by the sudden scolding, began to cry. "I didn't mean it like that," he sobbed, his cries echoing down the quiet residential street. But his mother wasn't done. "Apologize to Jennifer," she demanded, her voice sharp. "You've acted like a terrible person." "Mom, please don't scold me so much. I thought I was doing the right thing," he whimpered through his tears. "Learn the difference between right and wrong," she replied sternly. "What you did was completely wrong." "I'm sorry," he muttered, his voice barely audible as he offered his apology. But it was too late. Any remorse from him meant nothing now. "I'm sorry," my husband apologized again, but by then, I felt like a spectator in my own life. Watching everything unfold, a sense of relief washed over me. "I truly am sorry," he repeated, and even my mother-in-law chimed in. "Jennifer, please forgive us." My husband begged, "Jennifer, help me," but when his mother shot him a harsh glare, he let out a sad, defeated sigh. Seeing the grown man cry like that was pitiful, and as I watched this absurd scene, I finally said what mattered most. "Let's get a divorce." His face, already pale, turned ghostly white. "But I apologize. There are things we can't fix with just an apology. Our values don't align," I continued. "I wish I had realized it sooner." "Don't say that. I'm nothing without you." My husband clung to my feet, desperate. "What about the house? The mortgage? I can't do anything without you." "That's not my problem anymore," I said coldly. "I'm done with you, so give up." He looked devastated, but I had no intention of comforting him. No matter how much he pleaded, my mind was made up. My mother-in-law, seeing me shake my head, said firmly, "If you want a divorce, go ahead. I'll deal with my foolish son." "Yes, please," I replied. "I never want to see him again." With that, she took him by the arm and led him back to her house. Even as he walked away, he kept shouting, "Help me, Jennifer." But my heart was frozen, unmoved by his cries. The divorce process was swift. My ex-husband resisted at first, but under pressure from his mother, he eventually agreed. Since the divorce was his fault, I was granted alimony for the emotional distress he caused me. He also had to take full responsibility for the mortgage, as the house was in his name. I knew he would struggle with both payments, but that wasn't my concern anymore. Time passed, and I ran into his mother one day. She told me that after the divorce and the crushing weight of the mortgage, my ex-husband stopped going to work. He missed so many days that his company eventually fired him. Now, he works part-time at a construction site, constantly scolded by his mother. She said he doesn't get along with his co-workers and complains daily about wanting to quit. But his mother won't allow it. As for me, I rebuilt my life. I found a new job that welcomed me despite my lack of recent experience. A kind mentor helped me learn the ropes, and I quickly adapted. Now, I'm even in charge of training new employees. My life now is far more fulfilling than during my marriage. I feel confident again, proud of who I've become. Soon, I plan to visit my grandfather's grave. I want to tell him everything that's happened, knowing he's watching over me with a smile from above. From now on, the four of us will live together, my son Ben says with a laugh as he walks in. "Come on, let us in quickly and order something fancy for dinner," he jokes, making demands over the phone. It's a new chapter, and this time, I feel ready for whatever comes next. I was completely astounded by his selfishness. "That's impossible. I'm still in the middle of sorting things out at the new house," I exclaimed, my frustration mounting. "What new house?" Ben's voice was filled with confusion. In the background, I could hear his wife, Kate, sounding furious. "You can't always have things your way." My name is Nancy, a 56-year-old homemaker. I've been married to Ken for 30 years. We met at work and got engaged about a year after we started dating. "I will always make you happy, so please marry me," he said sincerely, and those words meant the world to me. Even now, 30 years into our marriage, Ken still makes me happy. I'm truly glad to have married him. About a year after our wedding, I became pregnant. It was unexpected but a joyful surprise for both of us. We had always hoped for a child. We named our son Ben. He was an adorable baby, and we cherished him, raising him with all our love. As he grew older and started to speak, our days became even more joyful, filled with his laughter and innocent mischief. Time flew by, and soon Ben was ready to start elementary school. We hoped he would make many friends and excel in his studies. However, things didn't go as smoothly as we hoped. As soon as Ben started school, he began causing trouble. He was always lively and mischievous at home, but his behavior at school seemed out of control. He disrupted classes and made his classmates cry with his selfishness. Every time the school called, I found myself apologizing, and Ken and I would scold Ben, trying to make him understand why his actions were wrong. Unfortunately, he didn't see it that way and felt our scolding was unfair. Nothing seemed to change his behavior. Ben struggled with his studies, unable to concentrate, and his teachers often pointed out his poor grades. We worried about our parenting and tried everything from tutoring to private lessons, but his grades remained poor. In middle school, the issues continued. He frequently disrupted classes and once even injured another child, which led us to apologize to the child's family. Ben was clearly seen as a problematic student at school. Whenever I attended open house or parent-teacher conferences, I noticed that other parents avoided me, making it difficult to make friends. It was a tough time for our family. Despite these challenges, Ben managed to advance to high school. Ken and I hoped he would graduate successfully. We allowed Ben to take up a part-time job, but only on the condition that he continued to study diligently. He often spent his allowance too quickly, so we provided him with only a modest amount, hoping he would learn to manage his finances better. Earning his own money seemed to make him very happy, and he worked almost daily at his part-time job, earning a considerable sum for a high school student. Remarkably, he kept his promise and did not neglect his studies. He worked hard even in subjects he found challenging, and as a result, we no longer received any calls from his school about his behavior. Ken and I were amazed by this sudden change in Ben. However, despite his hard work, Ben spent all his earnings and had no savings. He bought numerous luxury items, and his wallets and bags were more expensive than mine, which shocked me. Eventually, Ben graduated from high school, an achievement that once seemed almost impossible. Moreover, he was offered a full-time position at the grocery store where he had worked part-time for 3 years. His securing a stable job was a great relief for us as his parents. When Ben got the job, he decided he wanted to move out to live independently and freely. Although I felt a pang of sadness at the thought of him leaving home, considering all the effort we had put into raising him, I also understood his desire to spread his wings and find his own path. I also recognized that Ben was now a grown man, and seeing him work hard was a good thing, or so I believed. After Ben moved out, he rarely returned home. We had hoped he would come back at least for Christmas, but he didn't. It was his first year living on his own, so maybe he wanted to enjoy the freedom, although it was disappointing. Ken and I didn't push him. We assumed that future holidays would just be the two of us. However, as time passed, there were still no signs of Ben returning. He didn't come home during the summer vacation or any other time, and there was no contact from him. Worried about his safety, we tried to reach out. After several attempts, he finally answered the phone. "What? You're being annoying. What do you want?" Ben responded, clearly irritated. "Ben, we were worried about you. You haven't come home or contacted us since you left," I said, feeling both relief and frustration. "You're calling me repeatedly just for that." "I'm fine," he replied dismissively. "It's not just that. We were really worried. Can't you come home at least once a year?" I pleaded. "Fine, I get it. I'm hanging up now," Ben said and quickly ended the call. I wasn't sure if he didn't understand how much parents worry or if he was just being self-centered. Either way, I was relieved to know he was safe, even if it was a small comfort. After that, Ben rarely returned home, and we nearly gave up hope of seeing him again. Then, about 5 years after he had moved out, he suddenly appeared at our doorstep. "Mom, Dad, it's been a while," Ben greeted us casually. "Ben? You're here so suddenly. Is something wrong?" I asked, surprised by his unexpected visit. "Something wrong? Didn't Mom tell me to come back?" he replied. "That's true, but you could have at least informed us beforehand." "Sorry, but you're happy to see me, right?" he said, brushing off my concerns. "Yes, of course. Have you been well? You haven't contacted us at all." Okay, Dad, no lectures, please. I'm fine. I came today because I have something important to tell you. Something important? I asked, feeling a sense of unease. Actually, I'm getting married, Ben announced, casually dropping the bombshell. Married? Ken and I were shocked. Yeah, relax. I'll bring my fiancée next week. You can meet her, Ben said nonchalantly. Of course, but getting married so soon. You're only 23, Ben, I said, still trying to process the news. People get married at this age all the time, he responded confidently. As if his sudden visit wasn't surprising enough, this news left us completely stunned. A week later, Ben returned with his fiancée Kate. She was 21, 2 years younger than Ben, and she fit the image of a modern young woman, flashy and confident. They had met at the grocery store where Ben worked and decided to get married. Are you sure you want to get married so young? I asked, feeling concerned. Well, actually, Kate began, her voice softening, I'm pregnant. That's why we need to get married. Pregnant? I blurted out, caught off guard by yet another revelation. Didn't I mention it? Ben asked, clearly having forgotten to tell us about this important detail. We hadn't heard anything about it, Ken said, looking as shocked as I was. So, you're getting married because of the pregnancy? I asked, still trying to wrap my head around everything. Exactly. We want to have the wedding before Kate's belly becomes noticeable, Ben explained. The conversation moved quickly, and we struggled to keep up. Then Ben made a request that floored us even more. Actually, we need to pay a deposit for the wedding venue soon, and we're a bit short. Can you guys cover it? What? Ken and I were speechless. After all the shocking news, now he was asking for financial help. We can't just come up with money like that on such short notice, I said, trying to remain calm. Well, we're in trouble too. We've already invited friends to the wedding, Ben said, visibly upset. That's putting the cart before the horse, Ken said, frustrated. Ben and Kate looked hurt. I didn't think my parents would be so heartless. You're okay with us being sad because we can't have our wedding? Ben said, his voice laced with disappointment. That's not what we mean, Ben, I said softly. Then as parents, shouldn't you at least cover the wedding expenses? Ben asked, his frustration growing. Though it felt unreasonable, we didn't want to ruin their important day. Reluctantly, we agreed to prepay the wedding expenses, draining $113,000 from our savings. It was exhausting, both mentally and physically, but seeing Ben and Kate happy made us accept the situation. The meeting with both families went well, and Ben's wedding was a beautiful ceremony. We were relieved it had gone smoothly. After Kate gave birth, however, a new problem arose. The couple wouldn't let us see our grandchild Mike. When we tried to visit the hospital, Ben told us Kate was too tired and needed rest. That seemed reasonable, so we waited. Months passed, and still, Ben didn't initiate contact. Every time we reached out, we were told it wasn't a good time to meet Mike. We felt uncomfortable with how distant Ben and Kate had become, but they didn't forget to remind us about the birth celebration gift. They never visited, and their home address remained a mystery to us. It wasn't until a year later, during the Christmas holidays, that we finally met Mike. They visited briefly, just for a short talk at the front door, and we got to hold Mike only once. During that brief interaction, they demanded $200 for a Christmas gift. Afterward, as expected, Ben and his family disappeared again. 4 years passed quickly. One day, Ben and Kate suddenly visited our house again. To our surprise, they had another child, now 3 years old, and their older son, Mike, was already 5. He had grown so much that we might not have recognized him on the street. Why are you here today? Ken asked, sensing that something was off. I couldn't truly rejoice at seeing our grandchildren's faces after all these years, especially since Ben and Kate had shown up unannounced. After cutting ties with us for so long, I was suspicious of their sudden reappearance. My instincts told me this wasn't good news. Then Ben dropped the bombshell. We're planning to move in here, Ben announced, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Are you serious? You mean, live together? I asked, trying to process the shock. Yes, I thought Mom and Dad would be happy. You can be with your grandchildren and me every day, Ben said, clearly believing we'd welcome them with open arms. But why all of a sudden? I pressed. Well, we won't have to pay rent, and you two can help with the kids, Ben replied, proudly revealing his motive. It hit me then. After not seeing our grandchildren for 4 years, they now wanted to move in for free childcare and rent. I wasn't having it. It's the same whether we see them now or not, I said, feeling a growing sense of frustration. Ken nodded in agreement. Exactly. We've been ignored for years, and now we're only good enough when you need something. Ben was furious. What are you saying? I'm offering to live together. I was even thinking about taking care of you in the future. Anyway, moving in is a done deal. With that, he stormed out with his family, leaving us stunned. We had raised our son, and part of me felt responsible for how he turned out, but Ben was an adult now. He had his own family, and it wasn't our job to step in anymore. Ken and I firmly decided that we would not live with them. However, Ben and Kate were clearly serious about moving in. A few days later, boxes began arriving at our house, sent by Ben. It seemed they were planning to move in by force. Though the boxes were here, Ben and his family weren't yet. They were likely planning to show up later. Ken and I acted quickly. We changed the locks on the house and called a moving company. Luckily, we owned a condo that we bought as an investment, and we decided to move there instead. The movers were available the next morning, so we arranged everything swiftly. We transported some of our things ourselves, while the larger items were handled by professionals. We even contacted a real estate agent to start the process of selling the house. We weren't about to let Ben and Kate bulldoze their way into our lives. The next morning, the movers completed the job, and by the time Ben and his family arrived, we were gone. We had managed to avoid their plans just in time. Later that afternoon, Ben called. Hey, is something wrong? No, the question is, what's going on with you? I replied calmly. Ben half laughed. We're coming over today. The four of us will be moving in. Without waiting for a response, he hung up. Ken and I were concerned. We continued unpacking in our new home. An hour later, Ben called again, sounding confused. What's going on? Our boxes are outside, the key doesn't work, and I've been ringing the doorbell. Let us in and get dinner ready or order something fancy for delivery. His entitled demands astounded me. It's impossible, I replied. We're unpacking at our new house. New house? Ben asked, bewildered. That's right, we decided not to live with you. You sent your belongings without our consent, so we moved to avoid you. You moved? You couldn't have found a place so quickly. We already had another property. If we had told you, you would have insisted on living together. We had our own emergency plan. Ben fell silent for a moment. I could hear Kate shouting in the background. That house is already sold, so it's pointless to try and live there, I added. Ben sounded utterly defeated. You always get your way, he muttered before hanging up. Without hesitation, I blocked his number. Unfortunately, our warnings didn't seem to reach Ben. In a shocking move, he and his family broke a window to enter the house, moving in their belongings as if it were theirs. Naturally, we reported them to the real estate agency, and they were promptly arrested. During the arrest, Ben resisted, shouting, "This is my childhood home. What's wrong with staying here?" The police subdued him, and the entire incident was witnessed by neighbors and passers-by. Some even recorded the scene and posted it on social media, spreading the news far and wide. As a result, Ben was fired from his job the very next day. His reputation was ruined, and following his arrest, his life unraveled. I later heard that he and Kate divorced. She took their children and moved back to her parents' home, where she now works full-time. Her parents, furious about the situation, manage her salary to save for the children's education. As for Ben, I don't know what he's doing now, and frankly, I no longer care. Ken and I believe we've done enough for him. From now on, we're focused on living happily together, just the two of us. I have no intention of taking care of Grandma. I don't even want to see her face. Why don't you do it, Lily? My sister-in-law said with a malicious grin. She probably thought that if she could take control of the house, she wouldn't have to worry about Grandma at all. My brother smirked beside her, glancing at me and Grandma. I could see it would be hard for Grandma to find peace in such an environment. It's okay, Grandma. I'm here for you, I said confidently. My name is Amy. I've just turned 50 and am now enjoying a slow-paced life with my husband. Our two children have grown up and are following their own paths. The days when I juggled work and family while they were little seem like distant, tender memories now. Today, my life revolves around my work with my husband and the time I spend with my grandmother. My husband, Terry, and I run a well-known traditional restaurant. I manage the business as the owner, while Terry, a skilled chef, supports the establishment with his culinary expertise. I chose this path because I studied business in college and was fascinated by restaurant management. Initially, I wanted to cook for our guests, but things didn't go as planned, and I quickly shifted focus. During college, I started a kitchen job at a luxury hotel near the university, but my cooking skills were lacking. A senior coworker told me I couldn't even peel vegetables properly, so I was reassigned to serving. Although it was a blow, it's now a funny memory we laugh about. Whenever I faced challenges, I turned to my grandmother. She would listen quietly until I finished, then look me in the eye and say, "Amy, I know your dreams and hopes, but life isn't always a straight path. There are detours and bends, and each of these experiences helps you grow. Go at your own pace and stay strong." Her words were a comforting balm. "Thank you, Grandma. No matter how small the step, I'll keep moving forward," I'd say, always buoyed by her gentle encouragement. Having lost my parents early on, she was my greatest comfort and cherished treasure. In the midst of all this, I met my husband, Terry. He was a chef at the hotel where I worked part-time, having mastered cooking over the years. Knowing about my passion for cooking, he approached me and said, "I'm still learning myself, but I'll teach you everything I know if you're interested." I was thrilled and eagerly accepted. From there, we started with the basics, cooking together at each other's homes. The hotel's kitchen was often occupied, so we practiced at home, creating our own private cooking class. As we cooked and stirred pots together, our relationship grew deeper. Before long, we were seriously dating, and after a few years, we got married. Even after marriage, Terry continued to pursue his passion at the hotel kitchen, while I joined a startup, overseeing several restaurants to understand the practical aspects of business management. The theories I learned in university and real-world experience were worlds apart. Despite the challenges, I gradually got the hang of managing a business. With the support of my company, we were given the opportunity to run the upscale traditional restaurant we had always dreamed of. I took on the role of manager, setting up the restaurant and inviting Terry to lead the kitchen. After completing his training, he was eager for a new challenge and happily accepted. Together, we nurtured and grew our restaurant. But my deep involvement in work meant I regrettably spent less time with my dear grandmother. Now, Grandma lives with my brother Colin. He's a serious office worker with a somewhat troublesome personality. When I excitedly told him about my new role as manager through a company program, his reaction was unexpectedly cold. "Wait, are you seriously taking such a risk? Wouldn't it be more secure to remain a regular employee? Besides, managers hired like that don't earn much, do they?" he asked with a skeptical look. "Colin, isn't that a bit harsh?" I tried to counter, but his stance was firm. "Amy, listen closely. Stability is the most important thing. Why are you so intent on doing as you please? Not just you, but your husband too. Don't you realize how tough it is to run a business? What will you do if you fail?" His words left me taken aback. Sure, running a business might be hard, but we had the support of the company. It wasn't entirely on us. Then, with a somewhat malicious grin, my brother's wife, Lily, chimed in. "You two are quite daring, aren't you? But if things go south, don't come running to us for help." Her comment made me silently vow never to rely on them, no matter what. The reason my beloved grandmother ended up with such a mean sister-in-law began when my brother and his wife suddenly moved in. I discovered this during one of my visits. When I rang the doorbell, Lily answered, looking surprised. "Oh, Amy, what are you doing here?" she asked. I was taken aback and blurted out, "Lily, why are you at Grandma's?" Taking a deep breath, Lily smiled and said, "Well, I'll let you in on a secret. Recently, I've been taking care of Grandma here. I wanted to spend more quality time with her, so we decided to move in." She seemed quite proud of herself. Admittedly, with a new restaurant and everything else, I had been too absorbed to notice the change. I had been extremely busy lately, which left me with less time for Grandma. With Lily spending more time at home, she had probably been looking out for her. "Thank you, Lily. It's really a big help," I said, though a pang of sadness hit me at the thought of missing time with my grandmother. When I dropped by Grandma's house, Lily often greeted me with a hint of sarcasm. "Oh, Amy, you're here again. Think Grandma's quite busy, you know. But then, this is Grandma's house," she remarked. I would respond with a smile, "Sorry, I just wanted to chat with Grandma." Visiting Grandma's house every weekend was my joy. She always welcomed me with a warm smile, but lately, I had noticed she wasn't her usual energetic self. I tried to brush it off as my imagination, but one day my fears became a reality. When I knocked on Grandma's door and received no answer, I gently opened it to find her collapse at the entrance. In shock, I rushed to her side, shouting, "Grandma, are you okay?" I immediately called an ambulance and she was taken to the hospital. I accompanied her, and before I knew it, night had fallen. After some time, a doctor called me in to discuss her condition. He began with the ominous words, "She doesn't have much time left." I was devastated and struggled to process the news, but I understood that Grandma was gravely ill. It turned out that this was her regular hospital, and the doctor explained that her condition was beyond surgical intervention. It was best for her to rest at home. While absorbing this news, I received word that Grandma had regained consciousness. I hurried to her room, where she greeted me with a weak smile. "Amy, I'm sorry for surprising you," she said, her voice faint but warm. Through my tears, I asked, "Why didn't you tell me earlier, Grandma?" She replied softly, "I didn't want to worry anyone." At that moment, I felt the profound depth of Grandma's strength and kindness. I decided to cherish the time we had left and spend more quality moments with Grandma. "How about we tell everyone about your illness?" I gently suggested to her. She seemed a bit surprised by the idea but agreed. I hoped my brother and his wife would appreciate the chance to be with Grandma in her remaining days. A few days later, Grandma was discharged from the hospital. However, this didn't signify improvement. She was sent home because there were no more treatment options available. When we arrived at Grandma's house, my brother and Lily were lounging in the living room, their expressions relaxed. Lily, with a cheerful tone, remarked, "Where have you been? It's been so relaxing here while Grandma was away." My brother chuckled and added, "It's been refreshing to have some peace and quiet without Grandma's voice around." I was taken aback by their comments. One look at Grandma, and it was clear how serious her condition was. Trying to keep my emotions in check, I said, "Stop with the jokes. Grandma's condition is very serious. They can't treat her at the hospital anymore." Both my brother and Lily looked stunned. My brother, clearly in disbelief, asked, "You're joking, right?" Lily seemed to dismiss my words with indifference. Taking a deep breath, I told them firmly, "It's true. If you don't believe me, you can ask Grandma's primary doctor directly." With a frail voice, Grandma added, "Actually, I don't have much time left. There's not much I can do from now on." Lily's eyes widened in surprise. "Wait, I didn't sign up to be a caregiver. I'm just living here to save on rent. I can't handle such a huge responsibility," she said, her voice tinged with annoyance. I was incredulous at her words. Grandma's eyes filled with deep sadness as she whispered to herself, "So I'm a burden now." It was clear that Lily and my brother were only concerned with their own comfort, disregarding Grandma's feelings. Holding Grandma's hand, I comforted her. "It's okay, Grandma. I'm here for you. This is your house, and we should prioritize your well-being," I told Lily firmly, but she remained stubborn, showing no sign of changing her mind. "I'm sorry, Amy," Lily finally said, though it was clear she wasn't truly remorseful. I was taken aback by their attitudes. Grandma, wiping away her tears, apologized, and I felt a deep urge to protect her. Lily's gaze was filled with annoyance, as if dealing with us was a burden. "Can you just leave? Honestly, I get distracted with you guys around. Don't come asking for help later because I won't be inclined to assist," she said, her tone sharp. "Seriously, just thinking about Grandma gives me a headache." "Don't try to shift the responsibility onto us," my brother added, glancing at Grandma with evident irritation. It was clear that the inconvenience was on their side. Yet, as soon as they learned about Grandma's condition, their only thought was to get rid of her. Their attitude filled me with a heavy sadness. "We won't be speaking to Lily or you anymore. Our family relationship ends here. If anything happens later, don't rely on us," Grandma said, her voice trembling and her eyes misty. "I won't come to this house anymore. Goodbye." "Great, even if Amy gets into trouble somewhere, we won't be involved." My brother smirked. "If Amy is in trouble, it's none of our concern. Do your best with Grandma," Lily said with a dismissive wave. With that, Grandma and I left the house. I decided to take her to my place in a taxi and start a new chapter together. As the taxi door opened, Grandma's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, what a magnificent house," she exclaimed, clearly impressed. Indeed, our home was larger and more glamorous than where Grandma had been living. "The company we work for is unique. In addition to our regular wages, we received bonuses based on the restaurant's revenue. This generous system was designed to motivate employees, providing us with a stable and comfortable lifestyle. As I was lost in thought, the front door opened gently to reveal Terry with a warm smile. "Welcome back. I've been waiting," he greeted cheerfully. I had texted Terry about Grandma's arrival, and he had thoughtfully prepared tea for us. After such a long time, Grandma was delighted to see Terry again, her face lighting up with a warm smile. I led her into the living room and served her some of the comforting tea. As she sipped it, she looked visibly relieved and took a deep breath, saying, "This place feels like somewhere I can comfortably spend my remaining days. At the other house, I felt like I was just in the way." Her words carried a hint of sadness, and I could sense the coldness she had experienced from Lily and my brother. My shock grew when I learned that Lily had been taking Grandma's pension money without permission. Could Lily really do that? I muttered under my breath, and Terry, equally shocked, said, "I can't believe it. We can't let this go." I felt the same way. "We should give them a taste of their own medicine," Terry said passionately. I nodded in agreement. "Yes, let's take some action." A few days later, I received several calls from my brother. After waiting a while, I answered to find Lily's angry voice on the other end. "Hello? Why the constant calls?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "It's about Grandma's house. We've been asked to leave suddenly." "This is your doing, isn't it?" Lily shot back. Trying to hide my amusement, I replied, "I have no idea what you're talking about." Her distress was evident as she said, "Wait, why would she do that suddenly? Did you and Terry plan this?" "No, we didn't do anything," I said calmly. "Grandma decided to sell the house because it was in her name all along. We were surprised too, but she simply wanted to move on. The sale has already been finalized and there's a new owner. Staying there longer might cause issues." Lily's voice was filled with a mix of shock and confusion. "Do you think Grandma really understands what's going on? Did you guys offer her some sort of sweet deal?" "No, we didn't do anything of the sort," I assured her. "Grandma just wanted a fresh start." Terry spoke with the real estate agency right away, and Grandma agreed to the sale because she didn't want to deal with you and Colin anymore. As I spoke, I felt a sense of satisfaction. "Let's find a new path and build our lives separately," I added, ready to move forward and leave the past behind. I ignored Lily's frustration and tried to stay positive. "Where are we supposed to live now? Our previous flat is gone." Lily's voice quivered with anger. From what I gathered from Grandma, Lily had a penchant for shopping, always flaunting the latest designer bags and frequenting beauty spas and salons nearly every week. My brother's income, on the other hand, wasn't particularly high, and with their old debts, their financial situation must be quite strained. Despite their challenges, my brother seemed infatuated with Lily's beauty and probably indulged her every whim, which is why they had moved into Grandma's house to save on expenses. To be honest, I wasn't overly concerned about their situation, so I playfully suggested, "Why not try staying in a motel for a while?" "Oh, but it might be tough if you're short on money." Lily paused, then replied in surprise, "Why are you talking about our financial situation?" I didn't get any response from my brother at that moment. Later, Grandma took the phone and, smiling, said, "Actually, I told Amy everything. And by the way, Amy's house is really nice, spacious with the latest appliances and very comfortable. It's completely different from what you're used to." My brother seemed intrigued by Grandma's words. When he took the phone, he asked, "Why are you guys so rich? I thought you were struggling financially." "It might surprise you, but aside from our regular salaries, we also receive a substantial bonus. Roughly speaking, we probably earn about twice what you make in a month. Both of us work hard and live comfortably," I said with a hint of pride. He was silent for a moment, clearly taken aback. "Seriously?" "Yes," I confirmed. "You always said full-time employment is the best, but maybe you should broaden your horizons. We seem to be managing quite well with our approach." I advised them coolly, "You need to sort things out on your own without relying on us." Lily's sweet voice then surprised me with a request. "Hey Amy, could we visit your place, just your brother and me, even if it's just for a short while?" Taken aback by her proposal, I firmly replied, "No, I've already told you that we're done. Figure things out on your own." They tried calling me several times afterward, but I had nothing to discuss and chose not to answer. I decided they were no longer part of my life. Soon after, I received unexpected news. My brother and Lily had been arrested for shoplifting from a small store. From the police, I learned about Lily's enormous debts, which far exceeded what my brother's salary could cover. She had even been siphoning money from Grandma's pension. Debt collectors had gone to my brother's workplace, which forced him to leave his job. Their financial situation deteriorated rapidly, and they were reduced to stealing donuts and sandwiches to eat. The police informed me that, during their arrest, both my brother and Lily had pleaded with them to reach out to me. My brother said, "I know we've done wrong, but please help us." Lily tearfully begged, "Forgive our past mistakes and help us just this once." Despite their pleas, I couldn't easily forgive them. Their reckless spending and neglect of Grandma had led to serious consequences. I believe they were now facing the outcomes of their own decisions. Months have passed since then, but my feelings remain unchanged. Grandma is still lively and enjoys each day, which brings me comfort. I've taken time off work to spend quality moments with her, and I'm grateful that my company is supportive during times like these. Though Grandma occasionally feels unwell, we find joy in our walks through the garden and in our conversations about the flowers. These moments are precious to me. "Grandma, your birthday is coming up. Is there anything special you'd like to eat?" I asked with a smile. She replied, "I'd love a sandwich made by you." Although my cooking isn't exceptional, her kind request touched me deeply. I still have many places to show her, foods to taste together, and stories to share. I cherish every heartwarming moment with her and strive to make her smile as much as possible while she's feeling better. Despite Scene's affair being exposed, he remains oddly content, speaking with a nonchalant air as if the car we're discussing is his by right. His surprising attitude leaves me baffled. Why is he so happy, and why does he act with such arrogance toward me? Sometimes it feels like we're living in completely different worlds. If I could just hand over this car to him, it would be a relief. The $2,000 monthly payment would be his responsibility, but I suppose he should be able to handle it. I wonder if he's really okay with that amount. Even though I don't agree with his suggestion, he smiles at me with a joy I've never seen before. "My name is Holly, I'm 38, and I work in design. I thought I was managing my life well, but as I approach 40, the idea of marriage still lingers in my mind. I have neither a partner nor much experience in love. Seeing all my friends married, I sometimes felt left behind and considered giving up on the idea of marriage altogether. But seeing their happiness kept me dreaming. My life took an unexpected turn one day after work. Feeling uplifted, I decided to have a drink alone at a bar. I settled into a corner and ordered some snacks while scrolling on my phone. That's when a man approached me. "Any friends with you, miss?" he asked, peering at me with curiosity. This was my first encounter with Scene, who would later become my husband. "No, I'm here by myself," I replied. "Really? How about a drink together?" he suggested, taking a seat before I could respond. He started pouring himself a drink and, despite my protests, laughed it off, saying, "It's okay, just for a bit." Reluctantly, I agreed to his company, even though I wasn't in the mood to chat. Scene started talking away, and though I stayed silent, we eventually exchanged contact information and went our separate ways. I thought our meeting would be a one-time thing, but 2 months later, Scene and I began seeing each other more frequently. As we spent time together, I found myself increasingly drawn to him. His conversations brought me comfort, and when he said he missed me, it made me genuinely happy. Before I knew it, I was wrapped up in feelings I hadn't expected. 6 months after our first meeting, we became a couple, and 3 years later, we decided to get married. I had once thought marriage wasn't for me, so Scene's proposal felt like a dream. Looking back, it seemed like the pinnacle of my happiness. However, after we married, Scene changed completely. He seemed like a different person, making me question whether the man I dated was just an act. About a month into our marriage, Scene became distant, often coming home late. When I asked about dinner, his responses were always indifferent. "Whatever," he would say. Concerned, I asked if he was okay, but he would just brush me off, saying, "Leave me alone. It's none of your business." His behavior grew worse over time. He started coming home even later, citing overtime or drinking parties as excuses. I spent many nights alone, overwhelmed by loneliness. One evening, as I returned to an empty house after work, I received a text from Scene saying he'd be working late again. While I appreciated his message, the increase in his absences worried me. Had I done something wrong? Was he deliberately avoiding home because he was disillusioned? Scene eventually stopped coming home regularly. Our once slightly upscale apartment now felt like a lonely space. I found myself eating dinner alone and preparing meals for him, only for him to eat just a few bites before stopping. "What's wrong? Aren't you hungry?" I would ask, but his bad mood was a constant, leaving me to wonder how he ended up like this. I asked Scene about his recent change in attitude, and he responded bluntly, "To be honest, I don't find your cooking tasty at all." I was taken aback. Up until now, he'd always praised my cooking and even had seconds. On anniversaries, he preferred my homemade meals over dining out. So why this sudden shift? I apologized, saying, "Sorry, I didn't realize it was bad. I'll clean up right away." But he snapped, "Don't touch it," and continued eating, though he didn't seem to enjoy the meal, frowning the whole time. Since then, he started nitpicking about everything, from a coffee cup being out of place to a decorative picture slightly askew or a single strand of hair on the floor. I work too, so sometimes housework isn't perfect. I wonder if it's normal to be so fixated on trivial details. I've repeatedly told him that because of my job, housework might not always be flawless, but Scene won't listen. He always ends up shouting, "Just shut up and do as I say." The constant stress of dealing with his demands is building up, and I find myself questioning whether I should continue this marriage. The dissatisfaction with my imperfections and a swirl of emotions are making me consider divorce. However, the rarity of finding a partner at my age and the hassle of divorce proceedings make it hard to take action. I convinced myself that enduring is my role. Before we got married, I made a significant purchase, a luxury car from a renowned brand. It was bought on loan, as a lump sum payment was impossible. I'm not particularly obsessed with cars, but there was a specific model I'd always admired, and finally owning it made me incredibly happy. It motivated me to work hard, and I used it for commuting. Car enthusiast colleagues often chatted with me about it. Initially, Scene praised the car, saying it was a great purchase, but as his attitude changed, he began using it without asking. Even though Scene has his own car, he prefers mine, which is frustrating. Because of this, I've had to commute by train and walk for shopping. I tried to address the issue with him, saying, "I really wish you'd stop using my car without asking. I need it too." Scene dismissed my concerns, responding, "What's the big deal? It's fine if I use it." I replied, "It's not fine with me." He retorted, "I don't care about you. You're commuting by train now, so it's fine. Stop complaining. You have your own car, don't you? I prefer yours. Just let me use it without making such a fuss," Scene said, ending the conversation without listening to my concerns. The cost of train fares was quickly adding up, and walking from the station to home with a tired body was becoming increasingly difficult. My weekly shopping trips had turned into frequent errands as I struggled to carry heavy bags without the car. I'd even considered asking to use Scene's car, but he brushed off my request, saying, "That's my car. You wouldn't know how to handle it. Don't joke around." I felt it was unreasonable for one person to need two cars, but I couldn't argue with him. With his personality, even the slightest deviation in the car's position or seat adjustments would likely set him off, adding another layer of hassle. If I were younger, I might have fought back more, but now, I didn't have the energy. Scene continued his pattern of staying out late. He claimed he wasn't drinking because he was driving, but sometimes I could detect an unfamiliar perfume. I began to suspect he might be cheating, especially with his increasing overtime and nights out. However, without concrete proof and lacking the funds for a private investigator, I chose to ignore these suspicions. Scene seemed to look down on me, probably thinking I was unaware of his infidelity. In his eyes, I must have appeared foolish and compliant, someone who would tolerate anything. The marriage I had envisioned was far from the reality I faced. I had dreamed of a warm, caring home where we supported each other and spent weekends exploring new places together. I had hoped that the life I envisioned with Scene might someday become a reality, but it wasn't turning out that way. As I sighed and prepared another solitary dinner, I wondered if this was how my life would be from now on. Then something happened that drastically changed my situation. On a day when I finished work earlier than expected, I decided to head home without calling Scene. He usually wouldn't come home that night anyway. As I approached our house with a heavy heart, I noticed something strange. My car was parked in the driveway. It should have been Scene's car since he had been using mine. Curiosity got the better of me, so I approached the car and saw it slightly shaking. I should have gone inside, but instead, I moved closer and overheard Scene's voice along with a woman's voice from inside the car. I listened in, trying to make out their conversation. Scene asked, "Emma, do you love me?" To which the woman replied, "Of course I do." Her name was Emma. The conversation I had feared hearing was unfolding right before me. Scene said, "I want to divorce quickly and marry you." Emma responded, "Really? I'm so happy. How have things been with your wife lately?" Scene replied, "We barely talk. I don't even feel like talking to her. Why did I marry such a woman? I'm always with you, so I can't have a proper conversation with my wife." Emma laughed, adding, "That's true." Feeling utterly humiliated, my heart ached with unbearable pain. I didn't want to hear more, so I quietly stood up and began to head home. But as I moved, my bag made a noise and Scene, noticing me, called out, "Hey, you! Why are you here?" I stammered, "Oh, I was just coming home early." Scene's expression darkened and Emma's irritation was palpable as she said, "You were eavesdropping. That's the worst." Scene got out of the car and confronted me. "You said you were working late today, right? Why are you home so early? When you say you're working late, you usually come back much later. Were you trying to deceive me?" "I wasn't trying to deceive you," I protested. "I really was working late. Besides, you're the one who's been sneaking around while I've been honest about my work schedule," I retorted, expecting Scene to be rattled by my accusations. However, with Emma sitting beside him, he seemed to have given up any pretense. "So what's the problem?" he asked defiantly. "There's a big problem," I said. "We're legally married, and what you're doing is clear infidelity. To think you brought another woman into my car." Scene shrugged dismissively. "So what? I'm using it now. This car is ours from now on." I was so taken aback that I couldn't respond. His blatant disregard and brazen attitude left me speechless. It was as if he was daring me to argue further. If he wanted the car, fine. Let him have it. I thought, if they want the car, they can take over the loan payments too. The loan is $2,000 a month. I hope he can manage that. In reality, I was paying $22,000 a month on the loan, which was a stretch but manageable with my income. It seemed absurd to keep paying for a car that Scene now claimed. "I'll give you the car," I said, "but you'll have to take over the loan payments." Scene's response was immediate. "Why should I? You should keep paying. Can't you afford it?" I deliberately provoked him, and his anger flared. "Fine, I'll pay," he snapped, caught off guard by the amount I mentioned. A few days later, I transferred both the card and the loan to Scene. When he received the documents detailing the loan amount, he didn't seem surprised. Whether he truly realized the burden of the $2,000 monthly payments or simply hadn't checked was unclear, but he seemed eager to finalize the transfer and move on. With the car issue resolved, we proceeded with filing for divorce. I hired a lawyer, anticipating that Scene's infidelity would be a major factor. The lawyer took on the case with enthusiasm, and after several weeks of preparation, the day of the confrontation arrived. Scene was clearly furious, and Emma stood by his side, displaying an arrogant demeanor. I was advised multiple times that hiring a lawyer was excessive, but I knew it was necessary. As the case progressed, it became evident how Scene and Emma had met and what kind of person she was. Emma was the daughter of an executive at Scene's company and also worked there herself. Scene was aware of her background when they started their affair. Although Scene was clearly at fault for pursuing her, Emma was also complicit for engaging with a married man. I demanded a divorce, sought property division, and asked for compensation from Emma for the emotional distress she caused. Scene, seemingly desperate, offered to settle any demands I had, saying, "Property division, divorce, do whatever you want. How much is it? I'll pay if that's what you want." Emma, on the other hand, was adamant about not paying compensation. "Why should I pay? It was Scene who approached me first," she argued. "But you knew he was married when you got involved with him. I have suffered mental distress because of your actions. You can't avoid payment," I countered. Emma stubbornly refused, saying, "Absolutely not. What if this gets out to your parents or workplace?" I replied, "I could send evidence by mail if necessary." Emma dismissed my threat. "Evidence? Do whatever you like," she said, seemingly unconcerned. But I wasn't merely making empty threats. If she'd insisted she didn't care, I wouldn't hesitate to act. Since Scene and I were already finalizing the divorce, we completed the proceedings that day. Scene agreed to the property division, and we settled everything and went our separate ways. As promised, I sent the evidence to Emma's workplace. Apparently, Emma didn't believe I would actually follow through. I was later informed by my lawyer that she ended up having to pay compensation as well. After the divorce, I moved to a house closer to my company and relished the freedom from both personal turmoil and car loans. It was incredibly liberating not to worry about others' actions. Sometimes I wonder if my life would have been smoother had I not married Scene. There's a tinge of regret, but my colleagues at work often comment on how much more relaxed and content I look now. From now on, I plan to live quietly, focusing on my own well-being and financial independence. No more marriage for me. I have decided to live my life solely for myself. But about 3 months after the divorce, I was caught off guard when I suddenly received a call from Scene. Curious about the reason, I answered the phone. "Hello. Hey, what's this all about?" Scene's voice was tense. "What's with this red envelope?" "A red envelope?" I wondered if it was some kind of demand notice. "Calm down and tell me what's wrong." Scene, clearly agitated, continued, "What's this red envelope about?" When I opened it, it was a demand for car loan payments. I was taken aback. "You've been paying $22,000 a month?" Scene replied, "I had no idea. I thought it was $2,000 a month." "Didn't you know?" I said. "When we transferred the car's ownership and took out the loan, the amount was clear." "Maybe you didn't pay attention because I was managing the payments." Scene was frustrated. "I never imagined it would be $2,000 a month. Can't you continue making the payments now?" I responded, "Even if I continued making the payments, you'd end up using the car. We're divorced now. I'm not obligated to meet your demands. You insisted the car was yours in the first place. You can't just ask for payments now." Scene pleaded, "Don't be like that. We were married once. Even though we're divorced, we were in love, right? Help me out a little." I was incredulous. "In love? I've struggled for your sake all this time while you've lived as you please. Now you turn to your ex-wife for help. That's convenient. If you received a payment notice, you better get the money ready and settle it yourself." Scene lamented, "But I can't come up with that kind of money." I said firmly, "You're the one who promised to pay off the car loan. You need to take responsibility for your own words." Scene's anger was evident over the phone, but I had nothing more to say. I ended the call and refused to answer his subsequent calls. After ignoring him for a while, it seemed he eventually gave up as no more calls came through. 6 months later, I was still enjoying a comfortable life on my own. Moving closer to my office had made commuting easier, and I had more personal time to myself. I had taken up visiting art galleries as a new hobby and was enjoying my weekends exploring new exhibitions. One day, while I was relaxing, my smartphone rang with Scene's name flashing on the screen. I hesitated but eventually answered, wondering what he wanted. His once assertive tone was replaced by a weak, faltering voice. "Holly, it's me, Scene," he said. I responded coolly, "What do you want?" Scene's voice was barely audible as he admitted, "I can't make the payments anymore. Can you help me?" Surprised but curious, I asked, "Help you with what?" Scene started revealing details he had kept hidden. After our divorce, he had lost his job. The scandal of his affair with Emma, the daughter of a company board member, had led to his forced resignation. Emma had abandoned him, and despite his efforts to find new employment, he struggled with temporary and part-time work. Eventually, he sold both his cars, moved out of his rental, and returned to his parents' home. Scene had hoped that living with his parents would stabilize his life, but then his mother fell ill and required care. With his father aging, Scene had to juggle work and caregiving responsibilities. The car loans he had left behind still loomed over him, adding to his financial woes. "Please help me. How about we get back together? It would be easier for you too," Scene pleaded. "Easier for me?" I responded sharply. "If I got back with you, I'd end up shouldering the car loan payments and all other living expenses. Everything would fall on me, and it would be even harder than before. I've said it before, you're incredibly selfish, thinking I should reconcile so you can relax while I handle all the burdens." "That's not true," Scene protested. "Do you really think so? Do you understand the scale of the problems you've caused?" I asked. "You left your job and were abandoned by your girlfriend because of your affair. It's hard to care for your parents, but your situation is a result of your own actions." Scene was left speechless. I continued, "I don't understand why I married you in the first place. If I could meet my past self, I'd warn her against it. And now you expect me to agree to reconcile? I can't believe you're asking this after everything." Scene's pleas were desperate, but I remained firm. "I'll make sure you keep paying the loan. Take care of yourself. You can beg all you want, but I'm not agreeing to reconcile. Don't contact me again." "Wait, Holly, hey," he shouted as I hung up the phone. After that call, there were no more attempts from Scene to reach me, no emails, no texts, nothing. His urgency seemed to fade, and it felt like he was just trying to justify himself, portraying himself as the victim. 6 months had passed since our last contact, and I continued to enjoy my comfortable life alone. My new hobby of visiting art museums had become a cherished part of my routine, and my room was now filled with art catalogs and postcards. I even began thinking about visiting art museums abroad. Reflecting on married life, I've realized that even if given the chance to do it over, I wouldn't choose marriage. I'm simply grateful for the comfortable and fulfilling life I have on my own. "Since I'm getting remarried, you'll need to move out. The $55,000 loan will be covered by my new partner," he said, his voice dripping with irony. Years of painstakingly working to pay off that loan left me stunned by his audacity to shift the burden onto his new wife. "Then, I guess the $5,000 monthly payments will be your responsibility now," I replied, making clear the true amount I had been shouldering all along. "Sign the divorce papers without delay," I continued, "and just leave. Whatever comes next, even if it's hell, doesn't matter to me anymore." I'm Meg Smith, a 41-year-old housewife who works part-time. My husband Mike is 3 years older than me, and we've been married for 10 years. We first met while working at the same company. Back then, I was deeply engrossed in my career and had little interest in marriage or romance. However, after turning 30, a colleague who was contemplating going independent persuaded me to switch jobs. Just as I was starting to settle into my new role, Mike, a senior colleague from my old company, confessed his love for me. From the start, my relationship with Mike, who was in his mid-30s, was viewed through the lens of marriage. However, 2 years later, we tied the knot, largely due to pressure from those around us. My in-laws were incredibly supportive, treating me like their own daughter, which allowed me to continue working without concerns. A year after our marriage, we built a house that reflected our dreams and desires. Although it was a significant investment, we secured a loan with a manageable repayment plan. This major purchase solidified our commitment to supporting each other. For the first 2 years, we lived as a typical working couple. However, in our 3rd year of marriage, as we began contemplating starting a family, Mike dropped the bombshell that he wanted to leave his job to start his own business. He had always dreamed of launching his business before turning 40 and had been quietly building his network and saving money. While the future of his venture was uncertain, his resolve was unwavering. By the time I discovered his plans, he had already resigned from his job. I felt disheartened by the lack of communication between us, especially since he seemed to assume that my income alone would cover our needs. Shortly after Mike launched his business, my father-in-law fell ill and was hospitalized. It became clear that returning to his previous lifestyle was no longer feasible, and his home would need extensive renovations for his post-discharge needs. Although my in-laws insisted they could manage on their own, Mike decided that our family would cover all the expenses. I wanted to support my in-laws as much as possible, so I agreed to help, but covering the entire cost was a different story. Our household expenses surged, and I was left bewildered. Our income simply couldn't sustain such a large financial burden. Mike's business was struggling, with frequent contract cancellations and few new opportunities. His income had dwindled to nearly nothing, and I was left to handle all living expenses and loan payments with my salary. Despite being nearly unemployed, Mike remained indifferent to our financial strain, dismissing my concerns and treating the situation as if it were someone else's problem. Our credit card bills began to soar as Mike frequently went out drinking, claiming it was for client relations. Faced with the possibility of spending our lives just paying off loans, I suggested we either sell the house or shut down the struggling business. Mike dismissed my proposals, insisting, "We're not on the brink of ruin. This is a time to endure." The only reason we were managing it all was because of my salary, and I was the one bearing the brunt of our financial strain. Mike couldn't grasp this reality. Eventually, I felt it was pointless to discuss anything with him as long as payments were made on time. As the situation dragged on, our daily conversations dwindled. I knew Mike was spending time with other women under the guise of work, but I had become indifferent to him. One day, after returning from work, Mike finally spoke to me after a long silence. With a smirk, he waved a piece of paper in front of me and said, "I've decided to divorce you. Please sign here." I took a deep breath and responded calmly, accepting both his words and the divorce papers. It was likely because I had been contemplating proposing a divorce myself if he hadn't acted first. "Can we wait a moment? I just got home. Let's discuss this in the living room," I suggested. "I thought you wanted to talk, but now you're rushing me," he asked, his tone irritated. "I don't need any unnecessary conversation, just get it over with," he snapped back. Deliberately took my time moving to the living room, sensing Mike's growing impatience. I resented how everything was unfolding on his terms and decided to prolong the moment a bit longer. Regardless, the decision to divorce was made. The days we had spent together in the house we built with so much care were coming to an end. I wanted to savor these final moments at my own pace. As I settled on the sofa, I picked up the divorce papers once more. They seemed flimsy compared to the marriage registration we had signed a decade ago, possibly reflecting my current state of mind. "How long are you going to just stare at them?" Mike asked, his tone edged with irritation. "I have a question. What are your plans after the divorce?" "What do you mean? What am I going to do? Are you saying you're having second thoughts about the divorce?" "I'm going through with the divorce, but can we at least have a brief conversation before it's finalized? I'm planning to remarry, after all." "Remarrying, huh? So there's someone else. She must be young, attractive, and financially successful, unlike me, an old lady who didn't even have children with you. So you're planning to take advantage of her next." "Take advantage of her? What do you think of me?" "I'm simply laying out the facts. I've always handled the finances and you never had to worry about payments. Yet you act so superior. I can lead a better life without someone like you. The divorce is actually a favor for me." Sure. I'll brush off your bitter remarks as the ramblings of someone who's lost. Maybe I should have said more. "Keep talking. The divorce is final, and I won't have to see your face much longer. So please move out by the end of the week. I'm leaving today. I can't stand hearing your voice any longer. By the way, does your new girlfriend know about the loans you're carrying?" "Of course she does. She's agreed to contribute $500 a month for living here. It's no big deal for her. She won't struggle with the loan payments like you did." "Understood." After signing the divorce papers, I decided to leave with my belongings already packed. "I'll leave the remaining furniture behind as part of the asset division. Dispose of it if you don't need it. Just go. And best wishes to your new girlfriend. Handling a $5,000 monthly loan payment will be challenging, but good luck. By the way, I've left a note detailing the loan information for her." With a smile, I handed Mike the note, got into my car, and drove away from my former home. I headed straight to City Hall to submit the divorce papers. I hadn't felt this relieved in a long time and thought I should have divorced sooner without worrying about him managing the loan payments. A week after the divorce, one morning, I received multiple calls from my ex-husband, Mike. Though I had anticipated this, it was still quite irritating. I decided to address it and answered one of his calls. "Yes, what do you want?" "I wouldn't be calling if it weren't important." "That's quite rude, but is it true about the $5,000? I have no reason to lie. You're expecting me to cover your debt." I sighed deeply at his words. Maybe I should have explained everything more clearly instead of just relying on the note. Despite the inconvenience, all the details are laid out in that note. I thought you'd understand it if you read it. I'm calling because I still don't get it, even after reading. I'll break it down for you. Besides the mortgage on the house, there are the renovation costs for your parents' home that you chose, the personal loan for your father's medical expenses, the business loan for your venture, and the credit card debt you accrued, all under your name. If there were only a mortgage, I could have managed that, but there's much more. If you have doubts, you can verify it. I helped because I was your wife, but now that we're not, it's no longer my concern. I told you when I left that there's a monthly payment of $5,000. You must think this is a joke. You spent money like it was nothing. Did you ever consider these payments? Well, you'll have to deal with it with your new girlfriend. That's why you divorced me, right? Actually, she broke up with me. She said $5,000 a month is too much. I figured as much. It's understandable. Even someone with a high income would rarely agree to take on a $5,000 monthly payment for debts they didn't incur. No one wants to pay 10 times the value of a house over many years. Did you really earn that much after changing jobs? Yes, my salary increased fivefold after changing jobs, but all that income went straight to repayments. I didn't realize you were making so much. I wouldn't have suggested divorce if I had known. It's not that you didn't know, you just weren't interested. After I switched jobs, you never asked about my work or my salary. You should have brought it up yourself. You never discussed your income either, even when we worked together. You barely communicated. Once you went independent and had little to no income, yet continued to spend recklessly, I figured it was pointless to bring it up. Let's start over. Come back. I refuse. I finally achieved my freedom. Then what about the payments? $5,000 a month is unmanageable. Sell the house and use your income to pay off the remaining debt. You might be able to handle it if you adjust the repayment plan. Why not continue with the payments? I have no involvement with you anymore. I'm not interested in a stranger's debts. You're incredibly cold. Don't you have any empathy? I may seem cold, but I've been making substantial payments for over 6 years. Part of it was out of love for you, and part of it was because I felt obligated to your parents. If you wanted to come back, it might have been different. But you chose the divorce on your own. Technically, I have the right to sell the house, divide the assets, and even claim alimony for adultery. But I wanted to sever ties with you before dealing with that. I'm done with someone who turns their own money into a facade of wealth and squanders everything. I'm exhausted from covering your reckless debts. My life is my own now. Don't involve me in it any further. With that, I ended the call. Mike ceased to interfere in my life after that. The relief I felt when everything was finally settled was immense. Later, I learned that Mike had to give up his job and the house and create a new repayment plan for the loans. Returning to his previous job under the scrutiny of others must have been uncomfortable. Despite this, he would continue to be burdened by loan payments. I'd also heard that his parents decided to sell their house and move to a retirement home. It saddened me to think they wouldn't have faced such a choice if we hadn't divorced. I assisted with their move and contributed financially to their entry fees as a way to repay the kindness they had shown me. I hope they can now enjoy a peaceful life without the strain of $5,000 monthly payments. I can live comfortably by being naturally frugal, and my savings have steadily increased. I'm also looking into investing to secure my financial future. Currently, I'm moving forward with a new partner I met after my divorce, and I'm enjoying fulfilling days both professionally and personally. I filed for divorce. I'll be taking the house and the car. I know it will be tough, but hang in there. I'm not sure how much time you have left, but I hope you can push through. It might sound like kind words, but in reality, they were sharp and cutting. His smile at that moment hurt me more than anything. How could he do this to me? Leave me when I'm sick? Wasn't our promise to face challenges together? I can't stop crying from the shock of his words and attitude. There's no way I can forgive him. I intend to make him feel my pain, even if my body can't bear it anymore. This firm determination signals the start of my next step, a journey of revenge. My name is Anna. At 45, I've always been a dedicated housewife taking care of my family. I used to enjoy every day with my husband, Tom. Just like old times. We met through a friend's introduction. He's always been sociable, able to connect with anyone. When I was nervous at first, he reached out to me with a warm smile, and I quickly opened up. Our days together were as sweet as colorful candies, so delightful that I'd lose track of time. I genuinely wanted to spend even more time with him, and maybe he felt the same, cherishing our moments together too. It's hard to believe now, but we loved each other deeply and promised to marry. Living with him felt like a dream. Every day sparkled, and I believe we always share smiles in the future. But as time went on, Tom began to change, likely due to the stress from his job. His salary isn't that high, he didn't pursue specialized qualifications in school, and lacks a strong academic background, which limited his job choices. I suggested trying a new job a few times, but he always responded reluctantly, "I'm good for now." While I'm working full-time and we don't have any financial issues, I worried about what would happen if we had a child or if I got sick and couldn't work. To alleviate this anxiety, I made a suggestion. "Tom, my company's short-staffed in administration. You don't need any special qualifications, just the basics. Interested?" One day, a friend from my company's HR told me about an opening in administration. I thought he might be interested and suggested it, believing it could be a good opportunity to improve his challenging job situation. But his reaction was cold. "Why are you making decisions about my job without asking me? I chose this place myself. Are you saying there's something wrong with it?" I was taken aback. I had simply made a suggestion out of concern for his future. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you with that sudden proposal. I just thought the conditions at your current job seemed tough, and maybe this company would be a better fit for you. But he didn't take it that way. Just because you're my wife doesn't mean you can interfere in my career decisions as if you were a stranger. I have my own thoughts, you know. As he walked away, I murmured to myself. The word stranger resonated deeply. I am his wife, and we are a family, yet his words and attitude felt like they were meant for someone else. A crack was growing between us, widening rapidly. Tom had also been harsh with my family. My mother, a truly kind person, would regularly visit our home while I was away for work. She cleaned and cooked delightful meals, storing them in the refrigerator as her way of checking in on us. I was grateful for her kindness. I often invited my mother over for dinner, but lately, Tom seemed increasingly irritated by her presence. When he came home and saw her in the living room, he'd snap, "You're here again." Both my mother and I were taken aback by his remark. It made me question the state of our relationship and our future. How could we bridge the growing gap between us? My mother, with a gentle smile, said, "It's all right, Anna. If my presence makes you uncomfortable, I apologize. I'll leave earlier today." Hearing her say that, especially when she's always gone out of her way to help us despite her busy schedule, was heart-wrenching. "Tom, please think about how Mom feels," I pleaded. "She's always looking out for us. Please show her a little respect." Tears welled up in my eyes, changing the room's atmosphere. I remembered all the times my mother had brightened our home and couldn't understand why Tom would speak to her that way. When I come home after working hard every day, all I want is to relax. It's exhausting to have someone else around all the time in my own house. I tried to understand Tom's perspective, but I couldn't shake the appreciation I felt for my mother. Honestly, I didn't think I was wrong. It felt like Tom was being stubborn, but I wasn't sure how to express my feelings in a way he'd understand. My mother said, "Don't worry about it. If everyone's happy, that's all that matters to me," and gave me a comforting smile. Her warm words filled me with overwhelming guilt. That night, as I enjoyed the delicious meal she had cooked, my emotions were a jumble of appreciation and remorse. I couldn't stop thinking about Tom. I spent countless nights pondering how our relationship could improve, but a much larger challenge emerged at work. I suddenly felt dizzy and fainted. Thankfully, my colleagues acted quickly, calling an ambulance and rushing me to a nearby major hospital. The medical tests started, but everything seemed like a blur. I tried to reach Tom, but he didn't respond. Then I received the diagnosis: cancer. Fortunately, it was caught early, and with proper treatment, the doctors said I'd be okay. Still, I knew cancer treatments could be grueling, so I steeled myself for the long and challenging road ahead. I told Tom about the diagnosis and my hospitalization, but his response was indifferent. His silence made me feel incredibly lonely, yet I chose to focus on my treatment, believing that moving forward was the only option. The cancer treatment was tougher than I'd imagined. My health deteriorated rapidly, forcing me to stay in bed most of the time. One day, amidst this struggle, Tom finally appeared in my hospital room. "How are you feeling?" he asked casually. "Well, it's pretty rough," I replied, half jokingly. "It might have been a bit easier if you were by my side." To be honest, I was frustrated by his attitude. Why hadn't he come sooner? His support could have made a world of difference during these trying times. Instead of feeling relieved about our reunion, I was left feeling more isolated. I found myself increasingly irritated as I reflected on our past. Then, what Tom said next left me genuinely shocked and stunned. "I filed for divorce. I'll take the house and the car. I know it's tough, but hang in there. I don't know how much time you have left, but I hope you keep fighting." "Wait, are you serious?" I exclaimed. "Divorce?" A storm of questions raged within me. Didn't we promise to always stay together? I always believed that true couples would overcome challenges together. Tom's words confused me and left me feeling detached. I whispered to myself, "I don't need him anymore. I'll move forward on my own. I'll just forget about him." I decided that he would regret underestimating me, but first, I needed to end our relationship properly. "I get it. I'm sorry for everything. Keep the house, the car, whatever. If you want compensation money, I'll pay. Thanks for everything," I said. Tom looked surprised at first, but soon his expression shifted to a smug smile. "I didn't expect you to accept it so easily. I thought you'd throw a tantrum." Anyway, take care of yourself and don't bother inviting me to your funeral." As I watched him leave the room, a smile spread across my face. He didn't realize he had walked right into my trap. It would be interesting to see how his life changed now. I called a colleague from a company I knew. "Hello, long time no talk. I have a favor to ask. Can you help?" At first, he sounded surprised, but once I explained, he agreed. "All right, let's give it a try." Everything was set. Imagining Tom's shocked and anxious face made me smirk. This new sense of excitement even boosted my motivation for my medical treatment. A few days passed, and one afternoon after my treatment, I noticed that my cell phone had received 200 missed calls from Tom. The thrill of waiting for his call was oddly satisfying. Once I calmed down, I called him back and heard his shaky voice on the other end. "Anna, help me. I never expected this," he pleaded. Imagining his distressed tone made me chuckle. This was exactly what I had planned. Trying to sound concerned, I said, "Tom, tell me what happened." He took a deep breath before saying, "My name's on the company's layoff list. I can't believe this is happening." Listening to his panicked voice, I smirked, knowing everything was unfolding just as I had orchestrated. The person I had contacted was the head of sales at our company. I had asked him to reconsider the business dealings with Tom's company. Initially confused, he reviewed the transaction history and decided it was best to choose a different partner. That's why Tom's company started calling me. That's when I decided to reveal something I had kept to myself. "You know, there are rumors in your company about you and the new girl. Everyone likes her because she's so cheerful, and there are whispers about an affair. Is that true?" I could hear disbelief in Tom's voice. "Are you serious?" "You can't be serious. This has to be a joke." His surprise was understandable. After all, who would think an ordinary employee could influence his work? "Well, actually," I said, "I'm the CEO of this company." There was a pause. I could tell Tom was speechless on the other end. "It's no lie," I continued. "That's how we've been living so comfortably. My annual income is around $1 million. Your regular salary wouldn't have been enough to support your shopping habits." The truth was, Tom's spending habits were out of control. The $1,400 allowance he received from me was like a second salary, yet it was never enough. He rushed out and approached me with a pleading tone. "Can I have a little more?" At this rate, the money he receives from me might end up surpassing his actual salary. Most people would have abandoned such a luxurious lifestyle for something more stable, but since I earn $1 million a year, giving Tom a $1,400 allowance each month isn't a big deal for me. I've always wondered what he spent that money on. "Tom, yesterday was payday, wasn't it?" I asked. "I've always given you extra money on payday, but that might be difficult from now on. We're not a couple anymore, and it's only natural that you can't expect that monthly allowance since we're divorced." I wondered how he would manage from now on. "Oh, and be careful with the mortgage on the house. It's $2,000 a month. I know it'll be tough, but you'll need to manage it well. If you're late with the payment, you might have to leave the house." While a $2,000 loan isn't a burden for me, it's a significant amount for Tom. From his reaction, it was clear he was confused and in disbelief, repeatedly saying things like, "Really? And that's crazy." What I said was the truth. This is the result of my efforts to maintain our relationship, yet he took advantage of me when I was by his side, pursuing only his own desires. Maybe it's time he faced the consequences of his actions. Why did it come to this? I've been laid off and now have to figure out how to get by. How am I going to pay the rent this month? Despair was evident in his voice. He must have felt lost and uncertain about how to move forward. If I were in his position, I find it hard to imagine a brighter future. I understood that Tom's situation must be overwhelming and confusing, but it was a direct result of his past disrespectful behavior. If he had shown genuine care for me and my family, things wouldn't have turned out this way. This is the consequence of his choices. Had he truly respected us, he wouldn't be facing such troubles. Tom remained silent, perhaps at a loss for words. I felt a mix of pity and amusement. Was this it? Could I hang up now? Just then, he spoke in a panicked voice. "Wait, can we reconsider our relationship one more time? I know it sounds selfish, but I realize now how important you were to me." The idea of starting over with him made my heart race. After all the pain he caused me and how he abandoned me, the thought of going back felt daunting. He took a deep breath. "I know I've been reckless lately, and I'm really sorry I couldn't visit you in the hospital more often. But once you're better, let's go somewhere peaceful and have a relaxing time together. I want to see your smile again." His words felt nostalgic, reminiscent of what he said when he proposed. He promised a life filled with laughter and happiness. Back then, I was so swept up by his words that I jumped into the relationship without thinking. Married life, however, proved difficult, especially with his reckless spending habits. Maybe if I had understood him better, things could have been different. Tom's voice grew weaker. "Anna, I can't live without you. I want to be by your side and face life's challenges together. Can we start fresh, just one more time?" His voice was filled with sadness and a hint of desperation. Despite the emotion, it was hard to trust him after everything that had happened. "Stop it already, we're done. I've chosen a new path, and I can't go back," I said firmly. There was a trace of sorrow in his voice, but I could sense he genuinely wanted me back. "Please let me say one last thing. I truly love you, Anna. If you ever change your mind, I'll be here." I could have been swayed by his words, but I had made a decision about my future and our relationship. I wouldn't be influenced by his sweet talk any longer. Enough. Words like that will change my mind. Think about it. Don't you have another girlfriend? Shouldn't you focus on her? I knew about Tom's new relationship from information provided by his boss. His declarations of love now seemed hollow. I realized he'd say anything convenient to get what he wanted. It was frustrating that he only reached out when he needed something and turned away when times got tough. We couldn't be together anymore. Spend quality time with her and forget about me. I won't be reaching out, but if you need to contact me, speak to my lawyer. Take care of yourself, Tom. His pleas seemed sincere, but letting him go would probably mean his life would become more difficult. That was his choice. I had my own life to move forward with. I wanted him to stand on his own 2 feet. I hung up and adjusted my settings to block any further contact from him. According to my lawyer, Tom repeatedly tried to reach me. My decision was firm, so the lawyer respected it and provided no details about me. Unexpectedly, my lawyer suggested pursuing damages. Initially, I hadn't considered it, but it seemed like a way to seek compensation. I knew Tom and his new partner weren't wealthy. There were rumors about his serious debts. Upon investigating his affair partner, I found she had fled due to financial issues. When I contacted her family, they were furious and had her working hard at home. Actions always have consequences, and it seemed they were facing theirs. I had overcome cancer and made a full recovery. My speedy recovery even surprised the doctors. Returning to the office, I found a letter on my desk from the supportive sales manager. His heartwarming words touched me. When colleagues heard I was single again, some kindly offered to set me up. But after my past marriage, I wanted to cherish my time and focus on myself for now.